We'll begin. Thank you so much for joining us, Parshas Bamidbar, with the beginning of the book of Bamidbar. I'm going to also look at the camera. I'm going to be looking backwards and forwards. You must forgive me for looking in two directions at the same time. Today's shir is sponsored by Joanne Sachs and Tuvia Gans in memory of Joanne's mother, Sarah Chaya Bas Arya HaKohen Aleha Shalom. Her yahrzeit is on the 28th of Iyar. Her neshama should have an aliyah. We should be zeicher to see Tchias Hamesim. So I want to, before we begin Bamidbar, by the way, what does Bamidbar mean? It means desert, right? In the desert, in the wilderness. I want to read you three extracts that I have from modern literature with regard to deserts. And you should know that some of the greatest literary figures describe deserts in their literature, in their writings. I've chosen three passages, but there are many, many more. And forgive me for not choosing many more, but we have limited time. So the first one is from Edmund Jabes. I'm not sure that's how you pronounce his name, but I know that he was a Jewish writer in Paris, and he was originally from Cairo, and he lived between 1912 and 1991. And this is a quote from his book, Le Livre des Ressemblances. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. The experience of the desert has been crucial for me. Between sky and sand, between all and nothing, burns the question. It burns without being consumed. It burns for itself in a void. You can hear the biblical connotations and references in that. So that's the first quote, a fascinating idea that the desert is nothing, but at the same time, it's everything. Here's the second quote. It's from Pierre Loti, and he wrote a book actually that was called The Desert. Every morning, you wake up in a different setting of the vast desert. You leave your tent and are surrounded by the splendor of the virginal morning. You stretch your arms and half-naked body in the cold, pure air. Out on the sand, you wrap your turban and drape yourself in your white woolen veils. You get drunk on light and space. At the time of waking, you know the heady intoxication of just being able to breathe, just being alive. And then off you go, perched atop the ever-moving camel that steadily plods along until nighttime. You go along, go along, go along, and see in front of you a hairy head decorated with shells and its long neck, cutting the air like the prow of a ship at sea. Wasteland follows wasteland. You stretch your ears into the silence and you hear nothing, not a bird song, nor the buzz of a fly, because there is nothing alive anywhere. You're going to see that this is a reflection of a Midrash that I'm going to quote to you a little bit later on. And finally, I have a quote from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry in his very famous book, The Little Prince. "What makes the desert beautiful," said the little prince, "is that somewhere it hides a well." What a powerful statement. I wanted to use that as my introduction today for this shir about Bamidbar, because that's what I'm going to focus on today. Bamidbar in the desert, the fact that the fourth book of the Torah, the fourth book of the Mosaic Bible, the first 5 books of Tanakh, is called Bamidbar. And it's based on the very first pasuk in that book, in the book of Bamidbar. I'm going to read it to you. Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe, and God spoke to Moshe, Bamidbar Sinai, in the desert of Sinai, Ba'ohel Moed, in the tent of meeting, be'echad lachodesh, on the first of the month, Hasheni, the second month, bashona Hashenis, in the second year, letzeisom me'eretz Mitzrayim, when they left the land of Egypt, Lamer, to say, and then the book continues. Bamidbar Sinai is something that vexes the commentators. They are a little bit puzzled that it was important to mention the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu had this conversation, this intimate interaction with God, Bamidbar Sinai. Why does that need to be mentioned? Says the Midrash Rabbah, and this is the one that's most quoted, but you're going to see I'm going to quote other Midrashim as well. Midrash Chazal, an important source of information about the intent of psukim in the Torah, the underlying meaning in the fact that certain things are mentioned, drush, to understand something, the homiletic interpretation. Says the Midrash, Kol mi she'eino oise atzmai kemidbar hefker. Anybody who doesn't make themselves like an ownerless desert, eino yochel liknois es hachochma v'haTorah, is not able to acquire neither wisdom nor Torah, lo kach nemar Bamidbar Sinai. And for that reason, the Torah introduces the book of Bamidbar with these words, Bamidbar Sinai. You must understand that in order for you to truly appreciate what it is that the Torah is, what it means, what it could mean to you, you have to make yourself like an ownerless desert. Okay, so I've got a task for you now. Make yourself into an ownerless desert. Do you know what to do? Can you buy that on Amazon? Can you bid on that on eBay? How do you become an ownerless desert? Not very clear. So that's what we're going to look at today. How do we interpret this Midrash in any kind of meaningful sense so that we can take this lesson on? Clearly, Bamidbar Sinai is not a random phrase in the Torah. Chazal are interpreting it for us to take it on board and to take it on as a central motif, as a theme for the way we are Jewish, the way we relate to God. So, by the way, I believe that Carly can let us have the source sheet. Have you given us the source sheet? Okay, and if you're watching this online, either on YouTube or on my website, you'll see that the source sheet is available as a link. You just need to click on the link. If you're listening to this on SoundCloud, it will be in the comments. You'll have the link to download the source sheet. So now I'm going to look at a Midrash which actually is very similar to what we saw from Pierre Loti when he described the desert. And it's the scene of the Sinai revelation, receiving the Torah. I have to tell you that Parshas Bamidbar is always the portion of the Torah that we read on the Shabbos before Shavuos. So it's not insignificant that this concept of Bamidbar Sinai is something that is ingrained into us on the very Shabbos that always occurs before our commemoration of the anniversary of receiving the Torah. So this is the Midrash from Shemos, which describes the scene at Mount Sinai when we received the Torah. It's a fascinating Midrash. It paints a picture, a vivid scene for us of what happened at that very moment that God revealed the Ten Commandments. Amar Rabbi Avahu b'shem Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Avahu repeated the following in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, a tradition as to what it was that occurred when the Torah was given. Kesher nasan HaKadosh Baruch Hu es HaTorah, when God gave the Torah. Tzipor lo tzavach, no bird chirped. Oif lo parach, no fowl fluttered with its wings. Shoir loy go'a, no ox mooed. Oifanim loy ofu, the angels didn't fly. Seraphim loy omru kadosh kadosh, the seraphim, another form of angel, didn't say the kedusha. Hayom loy nizda'azah, there's no sea in the desert, but wherever the sea was, closest proximity to Mount Sinai, it didn't roar with waves. Habriyais loy dibru, the creatures, the creations, the animals, nothing, they didn't speak. Ela ha'olam shoisek umachrish, rather, the world, perhaps the universe, was silent and it was mute. The yotza hakoil, and at that moment the voice rang out, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God. That was the moment when we received directly the word of God from God. There was complete silence. There was total tranquility. There was absolute nothingness. It happened at Mount Sinai in the Sinai desert, in the Sinai wilderness. There was absolutely nothing. Ha'olam shoisek umachrish. And that was the description that we heard before from Pierre Loti. He said, the silence, you hear nothing, not a bird song, nor the buzz of a fly, because there is nothing alive anywhere. You are totally with yourself. You are, in and of yourself, the only thing that's there at that moment. That is the definition, the description, the understanding of a wilderness, of a desert. And let me now read you what is possibly the most famous of all the Midrashim concerning the Bamidbar theme. And that's the one which we're going to look into in greater detail, because I really want to understand it together with you, to see if we can take this on board, understand what it means to be Bamidbar Sinai, wherever you are. You may be in Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, New York, London, Yerushalayim, wherever you are. When it comes to Shavuos, and perhaps at any point in one's life, we have to be able to be Bamidbar Sinai. What does that mean? Says the Midrash Bamidbar Rabbah, Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe Bamidbar Sinai. Lama Bamidbar Sinai. Why exactly does the Torah need to tell us that this conversation, this interaction between Moshe and God took place in the desert of Sinai? Mikan shonu chachomim begimul dvarim nitnot haTorah. As a result of this allusion, this reference to Bamidbar Sinai, the rabbis, the sages of the Talmud, of the Midrash, understood that with three things the Torah was given. Be'esh, with fire, uvemayim, with water, ubamidbar, and with a desert. Be'esh minayin, how do we know that the Torah was given with fire? Because it says, V'har Sinai oshan kuloi mipnei asher yorad olav Hashem ba'esh. The entire Mount Sinai was ablaze because God descended in fire. So there was this concept of fire, of a raging fire. Fire, by the way, is something which connotes passion, meaningful involvement. The Torah, when it was given with meaningful involvement from God's standpoint, and with meaningful involvement from those who received it from the Jewish nation, who screamed and yelled at the top of their lungs, Na'aseh v'nishma, with fire, bo'esh, uvemayim minayin. How do we know that the Torah was given with water? Shenemar, gam shomayim notofu, gam ovim notfu moyim. It says, and this is a posuk, it's in Shoftim, Perek Hey, posuk Dalet. The heavens dripped and the clouds dripped with water at Sinai. At the very same moment as this fire was raging, there was the tranquility of water. There was the life-giving energy of water at Mount Sinai. And finally, and this is the key point, Bamidbar minayin. How do we know that the Torah was given at the Midbar and that this is such a central and important theme of the giving of the Torah? Because it says, Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe Bamidbar, that God spoke to Moses in the Midbar. V'lama nitna begimul dvarim halalu. So now that we've come up with this wonderful idea that the Torah depends on these three fundamental elements, fire, water, and desert, we need to understand, says the Midrash, why is that the case? Eloma elu chinam l'chol b'ei ha'olam. Just as these three things are free for anybody who walks the face of the earth, kol divrei Torah chinam heim, so too any words of Torah are free to those who wish to acquire it. If you want to acquire water, you can go and find somewhere. There's water for nothing. You don't need to pay the water bill. You could go to a river, you could find a well, and you could get water. Similarly, fire, you don't need to pay for fire. You've got a box of matches, you could use it, you don't use it. If you strike the match, the fire is nothing, and that fire could last forever. Fire doesn't cost anything. And a midbar, the vastness of a wilderness, that's something that you don't need to pay for. Nobody wants it. You can go into the Sahara Desert, and that could be yours. You could live there, never see anybody for the rest of your life. It's free. So too, says this fascinating Midrash, the Torah is free at the point of entry. You find it, it's yours. It belongs to you. The acquisition of the Torah costs nothing to those who wish to acquire it. Says the Midrash, Davar Acher, and now we have another explanation as to why these three things are crucial for the acquisition of Torah, and the Torah was given with them. Vayedaber Hashem al Moshe b'midbar Sinai, elo kol mi she'eino oiseh atzmoi kamidbar. Somebody who doesn't make himself like a midbar hefka, the Midrash I quoted earlier, eino yochel liknois es ha'chochma v'ha'torah, cannot acquire Torah and cannot acquire chochma. Lokach nema b'midbar Sinai, and for that reason it says b'midbar Sinai. So now we're going to look at the Sfas Emes. The Sfas Emes on two occasions address this particular Midrash and try to make sense of this idea that it's so important, it's so crucial to treat the Torah like a midbar, like a wilderness. The first piece is as follows. B'Midrash it says, Torah shenitna b'midbar, ma'elu chinam l'chol ba'olam kach divrei Torah. So the first part of the Midrash tells you that the same way as we're talking about a midbar, that the midbar is free to anyone who comes to it, so too divrei Torah. The words of Torah are free. They are available to anybody who wants them. There's no charge. Dover acher, the Midrash says, Kol mi she'eino oiseh atzmai hefker kamidbar. Somebody who doesn't know, if you don't make yourself hefker, ownerless, like a midbar, eino yochel liknois ha'torah v'hamitzvos, you cannot possibly acquire the Torah. Says the Sfas Emes, v'lich'oira shnaim elu hapirushim soisrim zeh. It would appear that if you put these two explanations alongside each other, they contradict each other. On the one hand, it's free. You can acquire it if you want it. On the other hand, if you don't make yourself like a midbar, you can't acquire it. So which is it? Is it free and it makes no difference? Or do you need to make yourself like a midbar in order to acquire it? Is that the currency that you need to pay? That's the question that the Sfas Emes asks, to which he answers as follows. Ochein vadai Torah chinam. Be very clear. The Torah is free to all. Mi sheyirtze yochel lilmoid ba. Anybody who wants the Torah can have access to the Torah. It is free at the point of entry. You don't need to show a ticket. You don't need to pay money at the entrance. You don't need to be a member of a club. The Torah is free. You can acquire it. It doesn't matter who you are. Aval. But there is a condition. Even if you don't have to pay for a ticket. You don't have to pay for the ticket. To actually acquire the Torah, just because something is free, doesn't mean that you have it if you own it. If you want to own the Torah, if you want it to be yours, if you want to absorb it into the very heart of who you are. As it says, an elderly person, a wise person who acquires, who has managed to obtain Torah. What does that mean? Zokein shekona chochma, hainu sheyesh lechochma dira v'kan beliboy. You know what? There's lots of things which are free, but we don't have room for them. I love books. I'm sure that I could go to some car boot sale and there's a bunch of books, and maybe I could negotiate and get a few boxes of books that nobody else wants to buy. I don't have to pay for them, and I could bring them home. But I have a limited amount of shelf space in my home. How many books can one person keep in their home? How much can you keep? How much can you have? How much can you own? The only way that you can own stuff that takes up room is if you have room for the stuff that takes up room. Just because something is readily available, just because something is obtainable, just because you can acquire something with great ease, doesn't mean that you can have it. Because if you don't have any place to put it, what's the point of having it in the first place? Do you know something, says the Midrash? This is the Sfas Emes explanation. Do you know something? Torah is free at the point of entry. But do you have room on your bookshelves to put the Torah inside? Do you have space for Torah in your heart? Do you have space for Torah inside of you? That's something else completely. How do you make space for Torah? The only way that there can be space for Torah inside of you is if you make yourself like an ownerless Bamidbar, that it doesn't matter how much Torah there is, that there will always be space for it. You will create that space. That is a second stage. Stage number one is free at the point of entry. No cost, no charge, no club membership. But stage number two is that you have got to want that Torah inside you. Many years ago, I mentioned it this week in an interview I gave. Many years ago, I heard the first speech that was given by Chief Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs. When he became the Chief Rabbi in 1991, his Kol Nidre speech at St. John's Wood Synagogue. And he said as follows, I will never forget it. He began the speech as follows. He said, if you know the answer, you can say it along with me. How many shrinks, how many therapists does it take to change a light bulb? One. But the light bulb has got to want to change. It's not about the possibility externally. It's about the possibilities internally. The Torah may be acquirable, but are you able to acquire it? That is something that's personal to you. So that's the first piece of the Sfas Emes, which he ends with Mikol Mokom Hakol Ba'al Yedei Esek B'Torah. The only way that it's possible for you to acquire Torah and for it to become a part of who you are is to immerse yourself in it and to involve yourself in its study and its practice. Now, here's the next piece of the Sfas Emes. The the fact that the Torah was given in the Midbar, dafka, specifically, was so that the Torah could be perpetuated even in a place that is dark, empty, void. That is what a Midbar is. We heard it before in those incredible descriptions. But then the little prince said, what makes a desert beautiful is that somewhere it hides a well. The possibility of Torah in a place which is totally devoid of anything else is an incredible chidush in a way. It's a novelty, and yet there it is. Ki ha-Torah hu chiyus hakoil. Because Torah is that which enlivens everything. As the Chazal said, Shekoidem ha-Torah haya beis alofim toihu. Before the Torah was given, there were 2,000 levels of voidness, whatever that may mean. I don't understand what it means, but what it means is there was complete and utter nothingness. V'HaKadosh Baruch Hu meir al yedei ha-Torah l'chol mekoymos ha'afelim. And by introducing the Torah into the world, God lit up all of those dark and dreadful places. That is the power of the Torah that can light up places that you would imagine could never be lit up. Umidbar hu belit siur. And a midbar is a place that has no definition, no contours, nothing, it's nothingness. And inasmuch as a person is willing to accept upon himself some form of whatever it is, he can merit the Torah that is indeed that which enlivens your innermost parts. Shall kol davar, of everything, not just of you, but of everything. Vuhu hatsura, and that is ultimately the image. How are you? What are you? How do you project yourself? Your image is a reflection of the Torah that can be inside you. V'gam midbar. What is midbar? Midbar, the word midbar is miloshoin dibur. You know that classical Hebrew has a lot of crossover between the roots of words. The word midbar, which means desert, has as its root the letters dalad, base, resh, and that is dibur, speaking. V'hanhoga, k'mo shekosuv b'mokam acher, as is written in another place, pirish aseres hadibros. What does it mean, aseres hadibros? What do we call the Ten Commandments, the Decalogue? We don't call them Ten Commandments, we call them aseres hadibros. What does hadibros mean? Sayings, speakings. The 10 speakings of God. Dibros, you getting the connection here? Dibros, midbar, lios, nidbar, hakoil. You should speak out everything al pi mitzvahs Hashem Yisbarach, according to the commandments of Hashem. Aseres hadibros, which are the very essence of everything else that is contained in the Torah, both bichsav and sheba'al peh. The Aseres hadibros, which is the essence of God's Torah, are called dibros, which have a connection, a literary connection, through the root of the word to the word midbar, which means desert. V'chein ha'odom tzarich lios bote lozeh, lios nimshach achar hanagosa yisbarach. A person has to completely push aside all of those other things in his life, become a midbar so that he can absorb that which God wants him to absorb. God's hanhaga, his character, his behavior, his everything about him, his characteristics, that which he does. How can we reflect him? We can't reflect him if we take on board everything else in the world. The only way we can be a reflection of God is if we shed all of those things and absorb God in its place. Aseres Hadibros are taking the place of the Midbar. V'hu hachana lekabolas haTorah. And this, in and of itself, is the true preparation for receiving the Torah. Hayira v'hapachad leida she'ein lo chiyus. The fear and the trepidation that without Torah you don't truly have something that enlivens you, that gives you life. And all of those other things that you think are so important and are so crucial to who you are, put them to the side, marginalize them, and focus on the Torah. That is the concept of making yourself, as the Midrash says, Kol mi she'eino oiseh atzmo kamidbar hefker, eino yochel liknos es hachochma v'haTorah. Unless you are a true midbar hefker, you'll never really be able to acquire chochma and Torah. I want to read you a fascinating Gemara in Sanhedrin. Does anyone here know about Yoav? Do you know who Yoav was? Joab? Yoav was the head of the army. He was the 5-star general underneath David HaMelech. David HaMelech was the commander-in-chief, but directly under him was Yoav. Yoav was the general who commanded the military, who took care of all the military campaigns for David HaMelech. Unfortunately, towards the end of David HaMelech's life, he really and truly let David HaMelech down. First of all, David HaMelech told him, King David said, don't kill Avshalom. Chase after him, make sure he's no longer a threat, but don't kill him. And when Yoav saw Avshalom, whose hair had got caught in the tree, he killed him. He defied a direct order from David HaMelech. But David HaMelech didn't do anything. At that stage, he did nothing. Then, right at the end of David HaMelech's life, there was a battle for succession between Adonijah, who was one of the children of David HaMelech, and Shlomo, who was David HaMelech's designated successor. That's who he wanted to take over from him, and eventually that's what happened. Shlomo HaMelech took over. When David HaMelech, King David, was on his deathbed, he called Shlomo HaMelech and he said, you must execute Yoav. I couldn't do it, for whatever reason, but you've got to do it. And that's what happened. David HaMelech died, and Shlomo HaMelech chased after Yoav, who tried to seek sanctuary in the temple. It didn't work, and he was killed. And the Pasuk says, the Pasuk in Melachim says, Vayikover beveisoi Bamidbar. He was buried in his house in the desert. Yoav was buried in his house in the desert. Very strange expression. So the Gemara wants to understand, why was Yoav buried in the desert? Otu beisoi midbarhu? Was his house a desert? What are you talking about? He must have lived in Yerushalayim. What do you mean he was buried in the desert? Omar Rav Yehuda Omar Rav. So Rav Yehuda says he heard in the name of Rav, Kamidbar. It was like a midbar, his house. His house was an incredible home. Ma midbar mufkar lechoil, af beisoi shel Yoav mufkar lechoil. Just as a midbar is free for anybody, anybody can roam in and out of there as much as they want and no one's going to ask you any questions. Yoav was a very hospitable and wonderful person. He may have betrayed David HaMelech, but as a host, his home was open to all. I think that this is a beautiful idea. The Torah is a midbar, and you have to make yourself like a midbar hefker. Yoav, even somebody who is criticized in Tanakh and died as a result of his actions, is praised for having made his home kamidbar hefker. His bein adam lechaveroi was superlative. No person was ever refused entry to his home. He considered every single person who walked into his home as his personal guest and treated them with respect and with love and with affection. And he took care of them. That's what it means to take the Torah. It's not me, it's not about me, it's not just personal to me. Bamidbar hefker. You're just one of many different people in the world. And every single person deserves your attention and your love, your affection and your care. And this is reflected in an idea that I saw in the Pri Haaretz. It's the letters of Rabbi Nachum Mendel of Vitebsk, one of the very earliest of the Hasidic masters. He says an incredible thing. Ein haTorah miskayemes. The Torah cannot stand, it cannot last. Elo b'mishe meisim atzmoi kamidbar. Except for somebody who makes himself like a midbar. What does that mean? Think about the Gemara that we just heard from Sanhedrin. Kamidbar hefka la'aniyim ula'ashirim beda'as. To those who are poor of mind and those who are rich of mind. Ve'einoi godol yoseh mechaveira, and he doesn't think of himself as being better than his friend. Just because you're better off than somebody intellectually, academically, materially, in some way in life, you've managed to achieve a better position. The fact that you are that doesn't make you better than anyone or worse than anyone. You are no better or worse than anyone. That's what Rabbi Nachum Mendel of Vitebsk says. Adarabba, botel b'metzios negdoi. On the contrary, he should completely nullify himself next to his chaver, his friend. Uvazeh misachtim v'nichlolim zeh bozeh. No matter whether your friend is greater than you or not as great as you, however you're going to make that judgment, whatever your criteria, ultimately we're all in this together. You're a midbar hefker and so are they, and we are all ownerless deserts. And that is the way that we can unify. And I want to end on this note. Right now we are experiencing one of the greatest equalizers, if not the greatest equalizer, that the world has ever seen in human history, where everybody is in the same boat. It doesn't matter where you are or who you are, if you're rich or if you're poor, whether you live in this place geographically or that place geographically, we are all completely in the same boat. We are a midbar hefker. What an incredible musar. This is the moment when we can realize that the only true value that we can have in our lives, the only true meaning that we can have in our lives is liknois Torah v'chochma, to acquire Torah and chochma. Everything else ultimately is meaningless in a situation where there's no difference who you are, where you are, or what you are. And with that, we'll leave it, and thank you so much for joining me.